I'm excited to be here.
Best of luck for both of us.
Hi, folks. I see some friends coming in and some familiar names here too. Hey, Lawrence. Hey,
Oh,
Jay. Good to see you there.
a lot of people joining quite quickly. How are you all doing today? Hopefully enjoying summer.
If folks want to use the chat box, I know in our usual instrumental events, I invite everyone to share their name and their role or organization that they're coming in from today. They want to share that. I'm not sure if the chat box has the capability to do that, but we can check on that there.
Yes, and we also have a poll where you can share a bit about yourself as well.
Belle, one thing I'm seeing on my end, I know we're maybe waiting to get started in just a sec. I don't have the ability to broadcast a chat message to the attendees. It looks like I can only send it to the host and panelists. Not a big
Oh,
deal. I can put it in the Q&A instead or something, but if there's a way to toggle that setting, that might be on Ori's end.
yes, I was thinking about that. And also, or maybe us to
Yeah.
see.
Andrew says the chat is disabled. Maybe we can
Thank you for
toggle that
that.
on.
Yeah, it was, I was going to ask you the same. So thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Ori. It should be there's like those three little dots um over kind of in the chat box that should allow you to toggle that on. And if not, we can modify with the Q&A box today.
We're going for the Q&A. Let's see. Wait, I think we now have the everyone.
Oh,
Let's see.
perfect.
Hello.
Hi,
Let me know
folks.
if. Oh, okay, perfect. There we go. So we'll soon be starting the webinar. Hello there. I like it's the G from C, Ohio. We have Andy here. Okay. A lot of people joining. We have a lot of people from all over. Nice. Well then, feel free. Oh, we have the answers already. Thank you, Ari. There are a lot of you who are going to be really surprised about everything that Rachel is about to tell us, because I'm seeing a lot of brand new people. And I like that a lot of you also don't know about Instrumentl. Spoiler, but it's a really cool company, especially for nonprofits looking for grants. And yeah, to provide a bit of an introduction to this webinar, we're going to cover how to find a good fit funders in under 60 minutes. So Rachel here is going to help us discover all the cool tricks to get those grants out there. I promise you they exist. It's just a matter of finding the right person who can help you obtain them. And your hosts today are myself, I'm Belle from Elevation. Some of you are coming from Elevation. So, you know, it's a company founded almost 20 years ago, joking about 15, but we're getting there. That we specialize in everything that has to do with the online world and helping nonprofits. So we've helped over 600 plus nonprofits so far. We're really proud of helping them with different website design, website building, and I come from the online marketing team. So I'm Belle, I'm a senior marketing strategist here, and I help nonprofits with their, as I said before, like digital marketing. There are some grants related. We're going to talk a bit about it later or in a next webinar. But I help with everything that has to do with paid social media, paid Google Ads, Google Grant, and more. And then we have Instrumentl joining us, that they are here to let us know all about grants because that's what they do. From 2015, they help you find the best grants. They have a lot of features that go from document management, team collaboration tools, and it also offers you a really vast database about grant opportunities. So it will let you know about all these amazing things that you can get as a nonprofit. With that being said, I wanted to introduce Rachel, who is joining us today to talk all about, she's the expert here, so how to find good founders under 60 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Belle. I'm excited to be with you all this morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you may be streaming in from. Belle gave a great kind of background context for Instrumentl, so I won't spend too much more time on that. But for those of you who are new to our platform, we are an all-in-one grants platform for prospecting, tracking, and management. We currently work with over 3,500 nonprofits and grant consultants to save time in finding and applying for more grants. Our task today, as Belle already referenced here, is to help you find good fit funders in under an hour. So I'm going to try and get through a ton of content in the next 53 minutes or so. And for those of you, my friends in the room who have been in our programs before, welcome. To those newbies, welcome to you as well. We're going to spend some time learning and growing together. As a quick intro to who I am, my name is Rachel. I'm the events and community manager at Instrumentl. My job is to help develop helpful and educational events like this one to share with our Instrumentl community. I come from the nonprofit world. I have about a decade plus of experience in the informal education field, specifically in museums, and I'm based in Los Angeles for any of my Pacific Standard Time folks on the call. Some quick FYIs, I'm getting through about 55 minutes of content. This is an instructional course with a live Q&A session. So we'll use the Q&A box, but also feel free to add thoughts and comments in the chat. I will ask you all to share feedback, share lived experiences you've had with each other. It's something I think is really beneficial for grant professionals, is to hear from others' trials and tribulations, and share in our joys and successes as well. So please use that chat box throughout the program. You will be getting the recording and slides directly into your inbox with whatever email you use to sign up for this program today. Please honor your personal needs. I always want to make sure folks come prepared with water and a snack or whatever you need in order to do your best learning today. But don't miss the chance to win. I've got some ways that you can earn a raffle prize today, plus a freebie that we'll be giving out to everybody who sticks it out to the end of the program. I want to make sure our closed captions are on. I can make sure to enable those on my end as well. Looks like they're on. Great. You can toggle that on in your own Zoom settings. Thanks, Giovanni. It's so great to see you. So you'll leave this workshop with some pretty awesome things that I'm really happy to pass along to folks today. Each person will be able to get a tailor-made list of good fit funders. You'll be able to see how we can automatically source those foundations for your specific programmatic needs for your nonprofit. You'll also have access to the best possible options for your organization. Our database now has over 18,500. I just updated this morning to check active public and private funding sources for 501c3s. So there's a plethora of resources there, and I'll talk a little bit more about how you narrow those down to the ones that match up well for you. And I'm hoping to save you hours of research. As much as I know searching for grants can actually be kind of fun, sometimes it can also eat up into the time we want to spend doing other important things for our nonprofit. So you'll see how Instrumentl's unique matching algorithm will help find good fit funders for your specific projects. To give you a sense of where we're headed today, I just want to walk us through kind of my agenda for us all. We're going to talk a little bit about the power of grants, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but just to ground us in why we think grants are so valuable and important, and why you may want to incorporate a grant strategy for your organization in the long run here. We'll also talk about prospect research, what that means, how you can best prospect research for your organization and subsequent projects you're looking for funding for. I'll talk a little bit about how you can evaluate prospective funders, making sure you're spending time on funders that are actually relevant to your organization. And lastly, I'll walk us through that kind of finding good fit funders piece on the actual search and find process of connecting us with prospective new funders, both local to our area and maybe even national in scale. If you stick it out to the end, I've got this free guide for folks. This is the ultimate 5-step grants calendar planning guide. It also includes a grants calendar template. This might help set you up for success if you're looking to incorporate grants more intentionally into your organizational strategy. So I'll be sharing that link to anyone that makes it to the end of our time together today. Also, if you are one of the folks that signs up for Instrumentl with a free trial today, and I'll explain how you can do that in a little bit, I'm raffling off $50 to bookshop.org. I found some really great grant writing books on there, over 1,000 results, but you could use this for whatever your personal reading interests may be. So that's going to be raffled off to anyone who signs up today, and I'll be able to see who opts in for that at the end of the program. Okay, let's get into the good stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of grants. And if we think that grants are really worth all the effort, Belle talked a little bit about this when we were getting started. There's a lot of work, right? But we think that the answer is yes. There are over 87,000 grant making foundations. And as I mentioned, almost 19,000 active grants on Instrumentl alone. And we add about 100 to 150 every week that are manually incorporated by our grants content team. So they're vetted and reviewed by a really amazing group of people who work really hard to keep those grants updated and relevant for folks who are searching through Instrumentl. So we think grants are super powerful because we've got all these opportunities for funding with wide regards of different opportunities you might be looking for in your organization. So we've got things like education and outreach. You might be looking for things that might support a project or specific program that you're providing, a service you're providing to your community. You might be looking for grants that cover general operating expenses, things like capital projects. So maybe you're working on having building upgrades done or larger initiatives that require capital funding. And then maybe you're looking to bring on more staff, technology, and internal capacity building that might be valuable to your organization. So think about as we start this session together, where you think your priorities lie with funding. Maybe jot it down in front of you or keep it in the back of your head, because when we get to the part of actually going to find our good fit funders, this will come in handy. We want to make sure we're aligning our funding priorities with the funders we're actually pursuing, right? So one other thing I really want to highlight here when we talk about why grants are so powerful is that foundations must give every year, right? As a general rule, a private foundation should make a charitable payout in grants and qualifying operating expenses, totaling to at least 5% of total assets annually to remain in compliance with federal and state tax codes. So you'll see that a bulk of those distributions are going to end up going to grants. And this is called the minimum distribution rule. So just a reminder that there are funds out there, and it does take a little bit of that kind of specific noodling to get to those foundations that might be the best fit for you, but they are required to be giving. So let's look at that in kind of a practical sense here. I'm going to pull up an example from the Instrumentl database. If you take a look at a funder like the New York Community Trust, this is using the foundation directory and Instrumentl, but you could also look at this through their IRS filing, their Form 990. It looks like in 2022, their total assets total to almost $3 billion. So if you're looking at 990s often, you're an expert grant seeker. You probably have reviewed many 990s in your day. I'm sure you're familiar with sourcing this info, but Instrumentl will kind of pull this all up for you and give you a great sense of a quick snapshot, pulling live from the info in the IRS filing. So if this foundation is following the minimum distribution rule and making that charitable payout of 5% of their assets, that means that this foundation should be distributing $147 million of funding annually. So that's just a specific example here, but I want to kind of highlight that there is a lot of funding out there, and that we can help you narrow down your searches so that you are finding foundations that align with your mission, align with your organizational strategy, and can actually access some of these funds that are out there.
Here we're having a question
Yeah,
because,
I see that.
yeah, they're asking if this rule apply only to private foundation or also US-based companies.
And I think I want to clarify this, Giovanni, because I think, are you referring when you're talking about US based companies, like things like corporate foundations or something like that, like the Walmart Foundation, as opposed to like a private family foundation? Because essentially any foundation, yeah, both. Okay.
Both.
So, yeah, companies, I'm not so sure. Like for profit entities, I don't think that's the requirement there. But for any foundation or charitable giving organization, they are supposed to align with this minimum distribution rule, regardless of if they're private or a public um, funding source. Yeah, no problem.
Perfect.
So, another reason why grants are so powerful is that foundations are actually generally super consistent in their giving. And one thing we've seen in Instrumentl, I've been able to just kind of quickly look, but if you look through Foundation 990s as well, you can actually see past giving trends, which organizations they've granted grants to. Is that there are multiple year horizons where organizations are funding repeat grantees. So, I talked to lots of development managers, and something that I hear is that they've been holding these grants year after year. If they've continued to prove themselves to the funder and set up a trusting and kind of mutually beneficial relationship, this can become a recurring stream of funding because of the consistency of their grants. So if you want to establish this as a viable channel, you can work this into your budget and get up a plan to grow using grants. And I notice, of course, when a foundation establishes a relationship with you, they are investing time and energy in making sure that you're a good fit for their organization. They've already put in that effort by reviewing your application and bringing you on board. So they love to continue that you keep making an impact. Which brings me to my next point. One thing I kind of really love about grants is that they can be systemized. So there are clear steps you're taking to submitting grants. We're going to go over a few things in a little bit that can help you take some of those first steps today that can go from your zero to hero grant strategy. But where I'm going with this idea of kind of systemized grants is that once you've done a few, we can see what it took to get there, create a process, better manage our time and set goals, or even bring in other staff, volunteers, folks to work on some of the pieces so that you can get some of your time back. So investing the time might take, initially a high threshold of time to get into submitting those grants. But once you have that ball rolling and you've systemized that within your organization, you can really create a great flywheel for building new grant applications and getting additional submissions done. It also can be a great opportunity for feedback, right? You might be able to see where your organization strengths and maybe areas for growth are if you're not getting certain applications through, and you're reviewing and seeing that there's maybe some consistent areas of growth that the organization needs to identify. And that leads me to my last point here. Grants can also help with some of this organizational accountability. Um, grants are powerful, maybe more powerful than other sources of nonprofit funding, like maybe individual donors, because you're getting immediate feedback on if things you're doing are actually driving impact. You're reporting results to the grant maker. Unlike something like a community event where it passes and maybe you don't have like a full understanding of the feedback loop, or the priority of measuring that success kind of passes after you've gotten that event out of the way and you're like, phew, okay, that event is done. That just makes it harder to determine whether or not the program offerings that we are providing are actually successful. So I've advocated for why grants are powerful. If you're in this room, you probably already think that. So I want to move us on to kind of the next important piece of grants, which is prospect research. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is, what we're looking for as we work through it, and then the steps to prepare our organization for prospect research. But as I kind of get to this next slide here, I'm curious, are there any folks that have had a particularly like positive or powerful experience with a grant they've won? They wouldn't mind maybe thinking about that for a second and sharing any thoughts in the chat. I love to hear success stories from folks and kind of just any quick thoughts that people have of a really powerful grant that made a difference for their organization.
Let's see.
It might be a lot to also think of on the spot. So what I might ask folks to do if they have ideas, or if they maybe haven't won a grant yet, that's okay too. But if you have thoughts, feel free to add them in the chat. And as I go through this next prospect research section, I'll come back and touch on some of the lived experiences that people are sharing about.
A lot of new information. Everyone's processing.
For sure, for sure. So let's get into prospect research, and we're going to talk about this specifically in the context of grants, right? So prospect research is going to be a broad term in the world of nonprofit fundraising, but in the context of grants specifically, this is really the process of finding, assessing, and qualifying public, private, and corporate foundations to pursue more strategic and planned giving. I love this definition because it's not only about the finding. That's kind of what I think people originally think when they hear prospect research. It's, oh, I'm prospecting, I'm looking for something, right? But it really is about that assessing and qualifying so that you're being strategic. It's not just kind of grabbing whatever you can find, right? So as you start to work on programs that require funding, you're going to be looking at ways to find the funding that's going to be the best fit. And with a good prospect research system, your organizations can start to move away from being really reactive and instead have a steady influx of funds so they can focus on their work, the most important thing, which is providing the services you're working to fund for your community. I see some comments in the chat, so I'll read those aloud before I get onto my next slide here.
Yeah.
Pamela said that the James Irvine Foundation, well, I think it's a West Coast, maybe LA based even. I feel like I've heard them before. Grant was game changing for us. That is so amazing, Pamela. Maybe you can share about what sector your organization is in too, just so folks can get some more context there. Jennifer said, we received a state grant for $100,000 to help provide additional programming support. That is awesome.
Nice.
And state grants are a whole different beast. So more power to you, Jennifer. That's really impressive. So I want to focus on the important aspects of prospect research and what information we can empower ourselves with so we really feel like experts when we're looking for funders. So what information on funders is publicly available? I'm going to go through some of these key stats that we want to keep in mind. And if it's helpful for you to jot these down to remember them later, or you can take a screenshot of my slide once I get to kind of all I think it's 6 elements that I really want to keep in mind here. This is something that's going to be really important in guiding your strategy for prospecting. So some of the key information on funders, we want to know about the grant maker's mission. That's something that's usually really easy to find if you're looking on their website. It's also usually listed in their Form 990s. What is their most important aspect of the work that they're doing with the grant maker? And does that align with the work that your organization is doing? Can your organization help the grant maker reach their mission? And how are you exemplifying that in your application? We can also take a look at key stats on giving patterns. And this can be a couple of different ways we can approach this. It can be the median amount of grants awarded over year. It can be things like, are they giving to repeat grantees or new grantees? So using the patterns year over year to help us get a better sense of if this funder is aligning with our priorities. Maybe we're looking for $100,000 for programming support, and we don't really want to be applying for grants where the median grant given is $5K. That just might not be worth our time. So making sure we're reviewing those giving patterns. In kind of a similar vein, we also want to look at the giving trends and cycles year over year. So we can look at which sectors of focus this grant maker has. We can use the NTEE codes that are listed in their Form 990 to see if they're giving to, say if you're a museum, like what I was pursuing in my previous role, we're looking for arts and culture grants mostly, right? And organizations that are giving to those specific sectors. So reviewing that as well to make sure there's alignment. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, you can also look at data on past grantees and their funded projects. So, for example, if you want to look and see, the James Irvine Foundation gave to this particular grantee, they're an organization that's very similar to mine, and they gave general operating funds or something like that. It'll even indicate to you if that's something that will be compelling for your organization. I've even had folks reach out to past grantees of a foundation and say, hey, what was it like working with the James Irvine Foundation? Did you have a good experience? Is there anything that I should know in going to the application process? And you'll find that when folks reach out for help, a lot of organizations are willing to support fellow organizations within their community here. One really important one is our geographic areas of focus. Obviously, there are some funders that are only giving in specific areas. You might find that you found a great foundation that matches a lot of these other tidbits here, but they're only giving in New York and you're in California. It's going to be a bit of a uphill battle to get that funder to be, have you be the first funder out of the state that they're usually funding in. So again, making sure you're prioritizing your time and not pursuing those that are giving outside of your areas of focus.
We have a
Oh,
question,
yeah.
I think, before we recap with number 6, but they're asking where is the past grant info posted?
Yeah. So most of the time that's going to be listed in the Form 990. It does depend. So some really large foundations, for example, like the Johnson and Johnson Family Foundation, they have so many grantees that they have a very different system of uploading their past grantees and past grant award info into their 990. It's not super regulated how that information is presented in the Form 990, which is a bit of a sticking point for a lot of organizations, but you will find that it's listed there. And I can actually, after this webinar, when I send the follow-up, I'll go back and look for the specific section number. So if you're looking at a Form 990, I can give you that section specifically. Yeah, no problem, Lori.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's a really beneficial one. And I will say I'll show you how to see it in Instrumentl too. We'll just pull that info automatically for you so you don't have to go digging through the 990. But that being said, you can look at that through the IRS website there. Okay, number 6, which is probably the most important one, I feel like sometimes it gets easily overlooked, is making sure you're actually eligible for the funding opportunity that is being presented. Seems like a no-brainer, and I know for experts in the room, this is probably the first thing you check. But for some of our newbies, make sure you're reviewing the eligibility requirements. If you have questions about that, email or reach out to the funder if they have contact information before you work on the application. Because if you're not eligible, it is not going to be worth your effort of going through and writing that grant. Okay, so what does this look like in practice? This is a digitized version of the 990 form. This is, again, an Instrumentl, but it's pulling information from that IRS 990 filing from 2022. And this is the Cliff Bar Family Foundation. So I'm putting a link in the chat. If you want to see, you can get started on your own if you'd like to. But I'll walk through kind of how this process works here. Hold on, let me copy and paste this so folks can jump ahead if they'd like. So what we're looking at here is we digitize the bulk of the information in the request for proposals, the RFPs for any funding opportunity, and the 990 information that's found on the funder, and presented in a way so you can pull that information really fast. And maybe some of your counterparts are looking at old school PDFs. That's also something that's linked here on this page as well. So you can see things like key assets. You also can see things like key people. I don't have a screenshot here now, but there is a tab here and you can actually look and, ask some of your leadership, like, hey, is anyone familiar with any of the trustees listed in this foundation? Because if you have a third degree connection on LinkedIn, maybe one of your board members or C-suite executives might be able to make a connection there. You can also see things like grant amounts. This is something that I was talking about when you're looking at funding trends year over year. You can look at this information in the 990s, but you'll have to go back through each year and create kind of your own dashboard for this. Instrumentl does a great job of just compiling it in a visual format for you year over year and also giving you an average so you can get a sense of what the grant awards look like for this particular foundation. There's also this little handy map. I was talking about geographic location as well. So this shows the giving trends for the past few years and regionally where they're giving. You can also see a little snapshot on the bottom here. This is the past grantees. So there's the information about the organization, and it looks like they've been giving to this particular organization year over year and the purpose of that. And all this information is pulled from the 990. So we've gone over why grants are powerful, the high level of doing some of this prospect research. I want to talk about how we're actually evaluating our prospective funders and give you all some ideas for questions you should be asking yourself when you find a funder, be it on Instrumentl, be it looking through 990s, be it through word of mouth, whatever it might be. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And actually, my first question for you all before we get into evaluating prospective funders, I'd love to hear in the chat box, how do you currently prioritize potential funders? If anyone can share an idea of, who's telling you, oh, this is the funder we should be pursuing. Are you directing that for your organization? If so, what parameters are you setting for yourself to prioritize when to pursue a funder or not? And I'll give folks a few seconds to kind of noodle on it and share thoughts in the chat while I take a sip of water here.
And while we're waiting, we're also having a question here. Maybe we'll be covering this after, but they're asking, how can a small organization with a budget less than 50K access some of the databases?
Yeah, I see this question from CF. I might save that for the next section here. I'll keep us on the funder focus right now, but I will absolutely answer this question and I'll add it to my queue. Thank you for asking there. For folks
Perfect.
too, like that want to add questions while we go, the Q&A box is a perfect repository for that. So feel free to drop those so I don't lose them in the chat box.
Yes, and as a reminder, we're going to have a Q&A session after the presentation, so feel free to drop your questions, and Rachel, as we've seen, has all the answers, or she
I
will in
don't
the
know about
recap, or
all
in the
the answers.
recap she'll have.
I'll caveat because this is recorded, but I will try my darndest, as folks know, to get you the answers. And if I don't know, I promise I'll follow up with any information I have. But I'm seeing a lot of great little tidbits come into the chat box here. JE is saying they take a look at the new grants given per year. So which grants are going to new grantees? That's going to give you a great indication of if it's worth pursuing. We usually say if they're giving to less than 30% of new grantees year over year, that's a pretty competitive funder. Not to say you shouldn't go for it, but that 30% marker is kind of what I use for priorities there. Jennifer says mission alignment, and if they've funded similar nonprofits in our state, I think those are both great indicators. And this kind of comparison with similar nonprofits can be a great way of getting a sense and even finding funders you weren't aware of. If you're looking at, similar nonprofits websites and seeing who's funding them, give you a great idea there. Lori says the due date, absolutely making sure you have the internal capacity available to even write and submit the grant, the amount that's being awarded, and the eligibility, all very important. Giovanni's saying they want to make sure they're closely aligned with their programmatic work and highly competitive to acquire the grant. That makes sense, both in terms of our track record of successful projects and against our competitors. Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll do one more here. Pamela is prioritizing that eligibility deadlines and level of difficulty in application, plus other local organizations who are funded. Yeah, you all, know the drill, and you're becoming really great experts in funder prospecting. So I'm going to take us to some next level here and give us some key guiding questions. I've got 4 questions that we want to ask about funder history, 5 questions about the RFP, the request for proposals, or the funding opportunity itself, and 3 questions you may want to ask yourself about internal bandwidth. Some of this you might already be doing, but I want to give you some frameworks to help you decide and maybe even exemplify to leadership why you are or are not pursuing a particular funder and opportunity. I know many of us probably get that email or phone call or text or whatever saying, oh, there's a grant out from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Shouldn't we apply? It's so much money. And there's sometimes a reason to say, hold on, like, yes, this is maybe a great opportunity, but does it actually align with what we want to be working on right now? These are going to give you some guiding principles there. And I'm guessing, I'm hoping this will allow you to decide if a funder is right for you in less than 3 minutes. That's my kind of test for you all today. So we'll start with questions about the funder history. And this is using some of that information that we have available to us on funders. 4 questions here. The first being, are there at least 3 previously funded organizations similar to yours? Now, these are going to be for foundations that have funded more than 3 organizations, right? So for newer funders, this may not be as applicable, but take a look and make sure there are at least 3. That'll give you a really good sense of alignment. Is your organization's geographic location represented historically? Like I mentioned, we want to make sure we're not the first organization in California applying to a foundation that only gives in New York. That's just not going to be a super lucrative position to be in. What percentage of those funded are new grantees? I talked about that kind of 30% mark. Anything above 30% is maybe going to give you a little bit of a more of a fighting chance as a new grantee. So take a look at that in the 990s there. And the last question here is, has the funder been giving to more new grantees over time or more to repeat grantees? So again, just getting a sense of if the funder giving history aligns with your initiatives and the time you want to spend working on an application for them. For our 5 questions for the RFP review, some of you already mentioned this in the chat box, making sure we're aligned across our organization. We want to make sure we're aware of what the grant maker's mission is and does it align with your initiatives? Kind of a no-brainer, but making sure you're really clear on that with your organization. Number 2 is, what are the specific goals of the grant RFP? Are they listed there? They often are. They have very specific goals that they have in mind for these funding opportunities. So making sure those are aligned with the goals that you have for this funding project in mind. Number 3, do you meet those eligibility requirements? Number 4, what's the size of grants being made? I saw a few folks mention that. Lori mentioned the amount in the chat box, right? We want to make sure this aligns with our budget needs. And number 5, what type of grant is this opportunity for? If you're only looking for capacity building grants, maybe you're looking for staffing support, infrastructure support, but this grant does not qualify for that. It does not mention anything about building capacity. It's focused on maybe like programmatic needs like supplies or tangible hard costs that your organization is putting on to provide a program. This grant might not be the right opportunity. So making sure you're aware of that as well. And then these 3 questions for internal capacity. So this is something that I think often also gets a little bit brushed under the rug or not necessarily addressed because we put a lot on ourselves to spend time researching and applying. And if you're a one-person show, I know a lot of nonprofit folks wear a lot of hats. You might be doing the schmoozing and also the writing and also the reporting, all the things that are required for grants. So make sure you're asking these questions for internal capacity before you're applying. Does your nonprofit have enough bandwidth to take on this application? Things like state, federal, government grants, those take significantly more time, not only on the application process, but also on the compliance on the other side. If you won the grant, does your nonprofit have the internal capacity to support compliance of that grant? Can you meet the reporting requirements outlined by the funder? So you actually need to be able to report on what you're doing, and you need to make sure before you apply that you can actually comply with that. And lastly, does this RFP have aspects where your nonprofit can repurpose past grant proposals? We love not reinventing the wheel. A lot of folks will use something like a boilerplate template. This is going to be some standardized language that they've used across grants. You've probably written your organization's mission literally 1,000 times. So make sure you have a boilerplate template ready to go, and you can copy paste some of that information right over into another grant that'll save you time and your sanity, probably. So now that we've talked a little bit about kind of how we're setting ourselves up for prospecting and finding these grants, I want to talk about how we're going to find good fit funders. And my first question for you all here is, how are you currently finding prospective new funders? I'm curious if folks have ideas, ways they're finding out about new opportunities or new funders in their network. And I'll give folks a second to reply in the chat. How do you find out about prospective new funders? Sometimes it's your boss. That's sometimes what came up for me, right? Someone in leadership or on the board. Um, Sometimes it's
Google.
Google.
Yeah, I was going for that. It's like Google.
100%.
I
Yep.
wonder if now ChatGPT can help you with that. Maybe.
100%. Oh, hey,
Yeah.
Rebecca. It's good to see you. Instrumentl, word of mouth. Yep. Google search and local events. I would highlight that absolutely. Those in-person networking opportunities at conferences or local fundraising events or local community events are incredibly valuable and sometimes often overlooked. Yeah, Giovanni
And
says
just,
chat GBT. Yep,
yes, I was looking at that comment. Thank you.
absolutely. CF Hamilton, we ask within our network of similar rescues. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great that you have that support of other organizations. Oh, cool, Jennifer. That's awesome. Gratefully you're part of Instrumentl, so they get updates weekly. Love to hear it. Yeah, Cynthia says sign up to receive prospective funder emails. I think that's a great way to do it. I've also heard of folks setting up Google alerts. If you use something like Gmail, you can really easily set up a Google alert. So anytime a funder is mentioned on the internet, it will come into your inbox and give you a little shout out, a little heads up. That might be a good way to not only know when an application or RFP is released, but also maybe just what those funders are up to in the news. Maybe they were represented at a local walkathon or something. And that can just give you more context for the funder when you're reaching out to them and cold emailing them. So yeah, I came up with a couple of ideas for what I thought people would mention. Those networking or connections through leadership, maybe Google. Some folks use listservs. I know some people are getting kind of those big emails that come to right to their inbox, or even things like funder databases. I don't know if anyone in the room used to also have to like go to the library and look through those like massive funder booklets and things like that, but thankfully that doesn't have to happen as much, but it still is a thing. So that's something that's been mentioned before as well. Where can you find this information? I'm a little biased. I do think one of the easiest ways is through Instrumentl, but you can also do this in a couple of other ways. You can be using Google. I mentioned that Google alert tip. You can be using things like ChatGPT to ask them to source, good fit funders. If you're setting up a certain search parameter around a funding project that you have specific parameters for, you want to set GPT up for success, right? So making sure you're giving them kind of the boundaries of which to do those searches. You could also be looking through funder websites. I've talked a lot about the Form 990s through GuideStar or the IRS. And then there are other paid databases that I'm sure folks in the room are familiar with and maybe using at this time. So I want to give us a chance. I said at the top of the hour that you'll leave this workshop with a couple of key things. I want to give everybody an opportunity to get those tailor-made lists of good fit funders, access all those options and see what's available to them, and hopefully save them some time. So everyone will get access to our 2-week free trial with some personalized grant recommendations. I'll show you how to do that. I also know there's some folks in the room who are already in Instrumentl, so I'll share a little tidbit, a little special thing for you too, that you can use to kind of up your grants game. But I want us to do a little bit of our own funder evaluation and research. And so I'm going to drop a link in the chat. This is going to give you access to the funder database, and it's going to invite you to start creating your free trial. It'll give you some context for what information we need in order to set you up. And I'm going to walk through that for folks. Anyone who is currently an Instrumentl customer, we do have office hours and our amazing customer success team. I just love these folks so much. We'll spend one-on-one time with you in office hours going over your grant searches, making sure they're optimized best for your organization. It's just a kind of free drop-in program that we offer on a weekly basis. So I'll drop that link in the chat as well. If there's anyone in the room who used to have a trial and would like to use this opportunity to start one again, I'm happy to give you an extension on your trial. You'll submit a request form, the other link that I've dropped in the chat. So 3 important links. Click one, whichever one fits well for you. And I'm going to just walk us through quickly kind of what it looks like if you're signing up for the first time and want to see what comes in through your inbox here. So you'll click on that link and you're going to fill out your information. It's going to look like this. I'll show a quick video of myself filling out my own information here. You'll enter in your name and your work email address, some basic information about your organization. You'll set up a password. This will give you access to the account. after you leave the webinar. I will remind folks too, this link that I'm giving out in the event is specific to the event. So if you sign up on Instrumentl after this program, you won't be able to get to the next step of actually accessing the funder database until you've had a call with one of our grant advisors. For this event, I've given you pre-access because I'm doing a walkthrough right now. So if you're kind of on the fence about starting, I'd love to get you in there during this event. It'll just help you get to see some of the applications of what I've been sharing over the past 45 minutes or so. So you'll fill out that information there and you'll get to this screen. So you can schedule a kickoff call. These are our folks that work with all of our new customers to basically make sure their searches are best set up. The database, as I mentioned, has almost 19,000 opportunities, and you don't want to see all of those coming in through your project list. So you can totally schedule a call with them. That I would suggest maybe later this week or next week if you want to spend a quick one-on-one time with them. It's usually about a 15 to 20-minute call. But you can also just click skip down here at the bottom if you're not ready to do that at this time, and you'll get to this page. I'll pause here for just a quick moment to let folks catch up. And if folks want to give me like a little thumbs up in the chat if they're ready to move on, or just say ready, I'll use that to pace myself in moving forward to the next slide. Thanks, Giovanni. You know the drill.
I was going to say super fast.
Yep, quick. Thanks, Rebecca. I know you're in there already too. I saw that you subscribed this week. Congratulations. It's really exciting. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. You can follow along on your own screen, or you can watch this back and just watch me right now if you want to kind of see how to best set up your project. What I will say, oh yeah, Janelle, happy to do that. What I will say for the project setup here is that if you're using Instrumentl or not, all of these search parameters that I'm going to set up for our project can be used with your things like Google searches too. So think about the categories that I'm sharing as I go through this project setup, and think about how you might define some of your funding opportunities when you're doing your Google searches. Can be used in and out of Instrumentl, essentially, is what I'm saying here. So when you create your first project, you're going to set up the geographic location. This will just make sure it's sourcing projects or funding opportunities that are related to your area of focus. I'm setting up a project based on a museum located in Los Angeles County, and I've put my organization's fiscal year, which is the calendar year. Next, I'll go into the overview of my project here, and this will help me. I'll set up my project name. Okay, that's one more important thing. And for this one, I'm looking for support for an education program at a history museum. So I've indicated my applicant type. One thing I want to highlight here is that you want to select applicant types that align with any of the funding that you're pursuing. So for example, this one, I'm actually going to partner with a local school district or school. And so I want to also see grants that are applicable for schools, because if I'm partnering with that organization, I should be able to see those as well. I did indicate that I'm an arts and culture organization. That was that yes or no question up here. And then it's going to ask you which areas does your project serve. I'm looking for a really specific region, but you could be nationwide in scope. You can keep things broad or more specific. And you can always edit this after if you find it's a little too narrow for your searches. The most important one I'd say here is fields of work. These are going to be essentially search terms that are going to identify the best fit grant opportunities. It's taken me a while, just as I get to know Instrumentl, to kind of figure out which ones fit best. You can test out with these, but I'd recommend starting with 2 to 5 to give you a good smattering of different opportunities. You can always, again, add more if you're not getting enough searches coming up, or take away some if you're getting too narrow of searches. So I've got 5 different fields of work here that align for my funding project. I'm also looking for a specific size of grants, anything over $10,000. And this is where we're talking about the grant type. What will I use the funds for? I want to make sure that the funder is aligning with that priority as well. The last thing I'm asking here is the kinds of funders I want to see grants from. I've selected all of them. You could be more specific if you'd like. This is your first time signing up. You'll also be able to invite people to join your team during your trial. You can do that now, or you can add them later, something that you can feel free to do at your convenience. And you'll see Instrumentl automatically sourced 316 grants for me. That was pretty awesome and pretty quick. I love to see how quickly that happens. So you should be able to see that exact kind of process happen for you. Um, and I want to give people time to noodle around on their own, but I'm going to go to the next slide so that we can let people kind of get started. And then I'll wrap us up because we're getting a little close to the end of our time here. A quick pop quiz, though. Since we're going to get into our own funding research as we go into Instrumentl or our Google searches, however, might be finding info about funders. What should we know about funders? Grantmaker's mission, key stats, giving trends, data on past grantees, geographic areas of focus, overall grant eligibility requirements, or all of the above. You can put your answer in the chat box if you have an idea of which number this pop quiz answer is.
A lot of
Awesome.
7.
Good. I was hoping I wasn't trying to be too tricky, but I hoped that people remembered some of the things we talked about a few moments ago. All of the above, right? We want to make sure we're looking at all of these details. And when you're going into your own database, you should make sure that you have a really great understanding of what is being presented on each of these funders here. So you can see I can do a quick little overview. This is like a 1 minute snapshot of basically how my history education program, I've got all these matches that have come up, over 100, right, that we saw when I did my first project setup. And I can scroll through and take a look at some of these grants. I'll be able to see information about the fields of work matches, make sure those align. It'll also tell me a little snapshot, a little overview of the eligibility and the mission of the organization. And then I'll actually be able to dive in a little further and be like, okay, well, great, this is good information, but we need to know more about the funder themselves. So you'll see I switched over to this other tab. This is where we compile all that info that I showed in those screenshots earlier, things like key people, key financial stats like giving average and median. You'll also be able to see the average grant amounts year over year, make sure those are in alignment. So yeah, we're at about 7,500, which is a little lower for this project than I was hoping, but it's pretty darn close. I was looking for 10K. This is where you'll see those past grantees. Looks like they have some funders or fundees in California. And I can take a look at actually all those organizations and see if they're aligned. I already see some that might fit with my organization and might even want to reach out to them. And this is kind of that great stat here, that openness to new grantees. So we see that this one is probably a good range, 35% going to new grantees. That's pretty helpful for us. So I'm going to move us along because I want to make sure to get to any other questions. It's your turn to test this out for yourself too. So I want to give folks an opportunity. You might have already, as I've been talking, doing a little bit of looking in your matches. I want everyone, if they're in Instrumentl, to find that one potential funder in your matches that might be a good fit based on the parameters that we've set up during this entire webinar. You can review that funder profile in Instrumentl. And then you want to add this funding opportunity to your tracker. There's a save button at the bottom on that right-hand side of that panel there. That's how you'll add it to your tracker. And that's where you'll be able to start to document some of those key deadlines. You'll get reminders for that particular opportunity. Basically, it can just be your repository rather than an Excel spreadsheet of all those grant opportunities that you've got coming your way. So folks can do that on their own time, and I'm happy to provide my contact information if anyone needs a kind of deeper dive walkthrough. But three key takeaways I want to leave us with before we get to questions here. Grants are a really great way to diversify your funding. I hope I've kind of made that really clear that there's a lot of great opportunities there. But we want to make sure we're ensuring funding relevance by reviewing the information about funders before you spend your precious time writing any applications. And lastly, Instrumentl does do a lot of the heavy lifting in finding new funders that are going to be the most relevant for your nonprofit. And when I've talked to other grant seekers across organizations, regardless of organization size, on average, folks share they save about 15 hours per week, about 3 hours per day on things like prospect research, grant tracking, and communication across and collaboration across their organization by using Instrumentl. I'll pause there because I want to make sure I get to some last questions. And Belle, if you don't mind helping me moderate, I'll take a few while I add a few more things to the chat box.
Of course. And now that there's a break, Congratulations, Rachel, for all the useful information so far. I know we're going to have a lot of questions, but I'm sure this has been super useful for everyone out there, all the nonprofit with great missions looking for grants. So it has even been super useful for me when I'm working every day and working with friends.
Awesome.
And I'm already seeing questions here and there. So, where can we start?
I saw
Okay,
I can yeah, I could go back to the one that I've kind of saved in the Q&A if we want to
we can start
um
there.
yeah,
So, you want to go ahead?
sure thing. And I saw
Okay,
Aaron yeah, Aaron just copied their question from the chat box too, which is perfect.
perfect.
Um
Thank you.
yeah, so CF asked about how a small organization with a budget less than 500,000 can access some of the databases. I think this is a great question because I think there may be other folks in the room that can relate to this. If you're a small organization starting out with a relatively small annual budget, I think one recommendation I would have, um, I hope I've made this clear kind of in the presentation itself. Grants are great, but they do require a lot of work. They require the internal capacity. They also require um, the capability to comply with the grant terms, all those key things that sometimes smaller organizations are not necessarily grant ready for. So I do have some resources to assess whether your organization is truly grant ready. That's why we kind of guide folks towards for Instrumentl specifically, a 90K or more annual operating budget. That being said, there are some smaller, scrappy organizations that make grants work for them, and they have maybe a connection with a funder already. Maybe they have a donor that's connected them with a great foundation that's a good fit to get the ball rolling. But you do need to make sure you have that internal capacity and ability to support grants up front. So I will drop some resources in the chat box. I'll pull those up while I'm kind of answering this next question. Um, there's a kind of grant readiness checklist that I'll share with you to determine whether or not you're kind of ready to go for grants, or you might need to set up a few more kind of systems in place to get you there.
Amazing. And then we have another question saying, are most grant applications standardized enough such that the text can be reused across application? A bit of what we were discussing before. Or better, can we use Instrumentl to apply to multiple grants at once for the same level? Federal,
Yep,
state, municipal. Yeah.
that is a great question. So currently, the way that Instrumentl works is that you can save. There's a documents library, so you can save regularly used templates in Instrumentl, which is great because then you're not necessarily like spreading your organization across multiple Google Docs or static documents that are not getting updated regularly. The second part of this question actually is like a new exciting feature that's coming out this fall. We have this new tool called our submissions tool, and it essentially will take your past grant applications and input them into future grant applications based on the certain parameters that you set. So it uses an AI functional tool, but it's taking your previous writing and applying it to new grant applications so you can submit directly in Instrumentl, which is a new side of our platform that we are currently in beta for. So if you are interested in that, I can drop more information on how you can sign up for the beta testing for that. If you have to be a current customer though, so you can sign up for a trial and start there. But that's kind of how we're currently rolling out that specific feature.
And that's great. Any last questions out there? I know this was super informative. Um, but you have Rachel here if anyone has some last questions they want answered.
I know we're getting close on time, so I want to make sure everyone can get to the rest of their days. Oh, of course, Erin, happy to. Um, so I promised everyone who stuck it out with me would get a little freebie. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat. This is our ultimate 5-step grants planning guide for folks that are a little bit at the earlier stages of their grant seeking. This is a great tool, but even if you're an expert and you just feel like you need some frameworks to set you up, I think this is a great tool and you can kind of use it to your advantage. There is an Excel template that comes with it as well to help you kind of plan out your grants over the remainder of this fiscal, or if you're just starting in July, your new fiscal year, this is a great time to kind of get yourself set up for that. So thanks for covering all this great content for me with me. I've got that freebie linked in the chat there. Belle kind of hinted at this in the beginning, but we are going to be doing another program with Elevation. They're going to talk about how to get some of those awesome Google grants that are out there. And we're going to plan for a program in July. So we'll keep you posted on that. Some other programs coming up. We've got a panel on Post Award with Nexus Marketing. And then I'm going to do a little tidbit on how to save those 15 hours. I mentioned that as a stat that we share a lot. I'll be doing a little deep dive on that. So you can sign up for our events here. And otherwise, thanks so much for your time. It was great being with everybody today.
It was great having you. Great having everyone here. Great questions. Great conversation started. And yes, see you in the next webinar. We'll make this webinar available in our YouTube channel so you can check out there. And we'll also be in touch sending everyone who's been here emails so you can also have the link.
Thank you, Belle. Really appreciate it. Hope everyone has a lovely Wednesday. We're almost through the week. Let's finish
Almost
it off
getting there.
strong. Yeah. Awesome. Bye, everybody. Feel free to drop me a note. I'll drop my email one more time in the chat just in case anyone wants to reach out. And I always love getting connections on LinkedIn for folks that want to stay in the know on things happening. So feel free to reach out to me there.
Enjoy.
Thanks, JE. Thanks, Angel. Thanks, Bob.